All right, so I probably will have to do a couple of videos for this project because this is the one project that I didn't get to talk to you about in any type of depth. I mentioned it at the beginning, probably the first or second day that I had you in class, but other than that, I haven't talked to you about it. So this is called the enlargement. And what I'll do on this video is I'll go through most of the steps, and then later videos I'll break it down into smaller steps. So our inspiration artist is going to be Georgia O'Keeffe, and if you had been in class, then I would have had more inspirational artists. But because she ties in so well to this one, I want her to remain the inspirational artist. Also, I think she ties in really, really well to the video that you watched at the beginning of remote learning, which was called Who Decides What Art Means, because there was a lot of controversy over her artwork, and people read into her artwork as being something that she said it was not. So because of that, I think she ties in really, really well to that little video. So Georgia O'Keeffe is also really important because she's an American artist, and obviously a female American artist. She was very well known throughout the United States and as well as the world in the mid 1900s, which was unusual for a female artist or an American artist to have to be so well known across the entire globe. Before she started painting, everything was kind of looking like this. So a lot of artwork was very, very, lots of browns, lots of earthy colors, not very vibrant, not very energetic. So in this one right here, it's a little bit of taxidermy. So this is, I'm sorry, a deceased rabbit, and then the pot in the background. This is one of her paintings. And it was a well-received painting, but she goes from painting like this to painting like this. So we go from something that is earthy and browns and dull and kind of boring to this explosion of color, very, very, very large canvases, really up close paintings of flowers. And she claims she was not a flower lover, but she really liked this whole idea of people taking a moment and really seeing something for its beauty. And I think that also ties into what's happening right now, that we're all kind of taking a deep breath and noticing things that we hadn't noticed before. And that's what she's doing with the flowers. So these will look more beautiful on the computer too. I don't have a fabulous printer, so it's working, but you know, the quality isn't beautiful. Here's a couple more of the up-closes of up-close paintings of flowers, and you can see different color schemes. You can see the composition. So she went through this large period of time of painting in large flowers. Then she went on to do New York skyscrapers, and then when she moved back to New Mexico later in life, she did landscapes of New Mexico. She's actually considered to be the mother of American modernism, which is pretty incredible for a female artist to be so successful. These are some of the ones that kids did in the past. So even though we are taking Georgia O'Keeffe as our inspiration artist, these do not have to be paintings of flowers. It can be paintings of whatever you want. It can be very realistic. It can be very abstract in your approach to it, so people can identify what you are painting. So for example, this one, you can tell it's a person and they have a basket over their head. You can identify what that is. And this one, I would probably have to tell you what this one was. This was an ad, so it's a tiny piece of an ad for a very 1980s type of lighting fixture. So this is more abstract in the approach. This one up here was a little piece of an ad in a magazine, and it kind of looks a little bit like street art. It's kind of modern in that way. It's a little bit flatter than the other ones. There's not a lot of shading in it, but it's really well designed and really well done. This one right here was a tiny, tiny piece of an ad for a faucet, and this one were done by the same artist, the same student. I believe they did this one in studio, and this was the first one they did with me. And this one, just because it was different than the other ones, a little piece of a landscape with a bicycle in the front. So what you're going to do is, this page will be on the Google Classroom as well, is this was taken from the internet. It was a great photo, so I used it. What you're going to do is you're going to make a viewfinder, and I'll show you what that is and how to do that in a later video. But it is just that mechanism to make a little scene from a larger scene. So it's a piece of paper that is in proportion to your canvas or your paper, whatever you're going to be working on, and it allows you to see a tiny piece of something rather than the whole entire object. Now, if you're putting together a portfolio, you want to make sure that whatever image you're working with for this that you owned, so it's a photograph that you have taken. If you're not putting together a photograph, you can use an image from the internet, and there's no problem with that. So this paper just shows how we're going to use it, how to make it, and I'll show you how to make it in a video in the future. Now, more than likely, we're going to be using our canvases because most of you only have the canvases that you were given. So I will show you how to make a viewfinder for your 8x10 canvas or your 5x7 in a future video. So just so that you have an idea of the whole process before we start to break it down, here are two of my viewfinders. Obviously, one of them is a little bit bigger window and one of them is a little bit smaller window. So a bigger window is going to have you have a larger area of the photograph that you're going to be working from, and as you probably can imagine, the smaller one is going to have you have a smaller view. And I really liked this photograph, and I thought you could get a really interesting modern type of image from this, and so that's what I was going to use for my demonstration. The only thing is that the greens were so modeled that I didn't think you'd really see what I was doing until it was all done. So that's why I didn't choose this one. Also, the greens are not that great in our paint. So you could do something that is super modern or abstract like that. If you don't like that type of thing, you could always go back to using your viewfinder and finding a different image that you can identify. So obviously, this is a landscape inside of a magazine, an interior design magazine. I'm assuming probably most of you are not going to have magazines at home and you'll be using your photographs or photographs from the internet, and that's fine. The last painting, we started off with a background that was the opposite color, and this one we're going to start off with what is called an underpainting. Underpaintings were very popular during the Renaissance. You would have your models come in, the artist would do a sketch, and then they would use burnt sienna or some type of brown, but usually a burnt sienna, to paint in all the values, the lights, the mediums, and the darks of the image. And then they would take that canvas back to their studio and they would do the actual painting of it. So here's two examples, more advanced than the ones that I'm going to show you. I really like to do them because of the fact that they do a couple of things. They check my drawing, and they will check your drawing. You'll notice your drawing mistakes when you start to do your underpainting. And the other thing is usually we do this painting in oil paints. Oil paints are more expensive than the acrylics. So I find that it also saves a lot on how many layers of oil paints that I have to put down afterwards. So an underpainting. So you're going to do an underpainting before you start your actual painting, even though we're going to do acrylics each time. So this is the one that I have chosen to do. It actually came from this whole thing right here, so you can see that I just chopped this one out right here. So I tried to find a section of this image that had some lights, some darks, and some mediums that were really strong, so you could see kind of where I was going with it. This is my viewfinder over it. You can see it's just taped to the back side of it. And then this is my canvas right here, and I have done the underpainting so far. And I would say it probably took me about 2 hours, maybe a little bit more than 2 hours to do the underpainting. It will save me tons of time later though when I'm painting, and also when I'm trying to correct any of the drawing mistakes that I have made. The underpainting does the whole thing for me. Okay, and then lastly, so after I do this, then I'll start painting it, and I'll show you the steps to painting it. But there's my underpainting. So I have chosen my image. I have sketched out my image onto my canvas, and you can probably see the X still because I'm going to have you graph them on a simple graph. And you can probably also see in my viewfinder that I've marked the centers and the centers, so I have an X here and a going across, and that's how I got the image to get on there so that it was well drawn fairly quickly. So I found my image with the viewfinder. I transferred it using graphing onto my canvas, and then I did the underpainting. And then next, of course, I'll start adding the layers for the different values and the different colors on there. And then lastly, there'll be a piece of paper, a form on Google Classroom. It will look like this because I've already put it up. It's just that it's not visible to you. And this will have your grading rubric, so the scope of the work, whether I think that you chose something that was challenging for you, composition, whether it's well designed, you use a color and value. So usually I tell people make sure that it has a whole bunch of different colors in it, because sometimes if you just choose something that's all blues, even if blue is your favorite color, you get really bored. Every time you sit down you have to use different blues. So it's nice that you have at least a couple colors that you're working with. And of course value is how light or how dark the color is. And then this is supposed to be realism, so you're supposed to try to get it as close to the image as possible. So how well are you doing that? And are you consistent? Is there a really messy part and then there's really clean parts, or are you pretty much the same all the way through? You're going to give me 2 photos of your work. One is going to be a photo of the whole piece, and then if you could take a close-up of one of the areas that you like the most, that will really help me to see how well you painted. And then your written response is going to be describe 3 challenges you encountered and how you overcame these challenges. Describe 3 ways your work is well composed. So you know at this point when I say well composed, do you have a color scheme? Is there a theme? Is there an area of interest? Did you overlap to create depth? Is there movement in your piece? Do you have small, medium, and large areas? That's what you're talking about when you answer that question. And then describe the most successful part of your work. What characteristics make this part your favorite part? Okay? And that's what you'll pass in the end. Okie dokie, cool cats and kittens. I will be putting on other videos as I go along and describe how to make the viewfinder, and then also as I paint my picture as well.